Hello, everybody, and welcome to our latest edition of WSOU Sports Talk. I'm Wilnir Louis alongside Joe Cammarota and George Makris for this one. And before we even get started, we are recording this on June 21st, also known as Father's Day. So I just want to say happy Father's Day to all the fathers that's listening, and to anybody who's listening that has a father or has a father figure in their life. Happy Father's Day to you. A lot of topics that we need to talk about that happened over the last week of sports. I mean, you have a lot of coronavirus things that might be affecting how sports returns. Here in the United States, you have the MLB and their discussions, the NBA, and their discussions in restarting the season, as well as the NFL and some local news here in the tri-state area. But before we even get started to all that, guys, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. Great Father's Day so far, and looking forward to continuing it after this.
Yeah, same. Happy to be here and excited to talk about what's going on in the sports world.
So, I mean, let's just get right into it. The coronavirus, again, just wiping away sports on Friday. It marked 100 days since sports was virtually shut down because of the coronavirus, with the NBA starting and then all the other leagues following suit. And you would hope that 100 days after everything shut down, that sports would find a way to return back. And I mean, it has. You have teams internationally, you have soccer and tennis in action right now with no fans, and even boxing too, finding a way to restart their action and being able to do matches and being able to play games. But it seems like here in the United States, we're just unable to find our way. You have recently 23 Clemson football players and 28 student athletes testing positive for coronavirus. You have a player on the PGA Tour who tested positive for coronavirus. You have a 49ers player who was working out with his teammates who tested positive. You have a WWE developmental player testing positive. You have the Phillies who was working out in Florida. They're testing. They had 5 players and 3 staff members test positive. You have the Tampa Bay Lightning that had players that test positive. You have the Blue Jays. They had some players that experienced symptoms. You have a player on the Maple Leafs testing positive. And then you also have the MLB training camps shutting down for cleaning because of the coronavirus. And then you also have Florida getting a record amount of cases over the past couple of days. And that's kind of concerning because you have the NBA who's trying to restart in Florida. And, Florida's having a lot of cases, and how's that going to relate to the players? But Adam Silver said he's still slightly optimistic about the NBA being able to restart at Disney. Staying on the same lines of the NBA, you have NBA players that should be wearing a smart ring that theoretically detects the coronavirus 3 days before symptoms start coming. And then you also have NASCAR, who's starting to figure out how to get fans back into their arenas, with the Texas Motor Speedway being able to host fans hopefully by July 19th. And then even in the NBA, you have 2 Bucks players that tested positive for coronavirus. And then internationally, the Chinese Basketball League was able to restart. So again, a lot of topics, and all of these news stories came out over the past week. So to start off this conversation, what are a couple of those headlines that maybe I read out, or maybe a headline that you saw that really stands out to you about the restart of sports?
Well, for me, I mean, I find it interesting how in everywhere else, sports are starting to come back. Countries have had plans to get their sports back. Like I know in Germany with the Bundesliga, they had plans a while back. I mean, they started back up in May. They said, we're going to isolate our teams and their training facilities. We're going to get them back. We're going to do no fans. And through that, they're going to play. And I don't think they've had a case. I mean, I could be wrong, but they have had very little or no cases of coronavirus with their players. In England with the Premier League, they did basically the same thing. And I know England is kind of with us with the coronavirus, where they still have a lot of people getting it over there. And there's still like a high transmission rate and high numbers over there. but they're still able to isolate their players. And I mean, there's been cases. I know there was a Norwich player who tested positive. There were some other in some of the lower leagues who've tested positive, but they've developed a great plan on how to isolate players and be able to get their games going again. And I think if we want sports here in the U.S., then we're going to have to come up with a similar plan to keep players in teams isolated, sort of like how the NBA is doing it in Florida, to try to prevent the spreading of the coronavirus so we could get going.
Yeah, I feel detection is key, and the NBA has took initiative in doing that with the coronavirus rings. And this ring developed by Aurora Health has been in the works since May. It's currently valued at $299. And some players and some staff either praise it or are absolutely like all not for it. And it detects 90%. It detects symptoms 3 days early. It's 90% accurate, and it does that. It's kind of like a Fitbit. Like it studies your heat, your body heat, and your heart rate, and it determines like, okay, like is this player or athlete gonna develop symptoms that will affect others? And players such as Kyle Kuzma of the Lakers already said it looks like a tracking device, while Judy Seth, Lakers sports performance director, said it's like a Fitbit but more accurate and durable. So some people either love it or hate it, and it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see who will wear that ring when the NBA season hopefully comes around.
Yeah, I mean, kind of touching to that ring, I saw a lot of people on Twitter, and actually, before the NBA announced it, I actually saw an article about it where they were talking about basically what the capabilities that the ring has, like you said, figuring out body temperature, figuring out heart rate, breathing rate too, something along those lines, and being able to detect the coronavirus. Now, a lot of the articles that I saw, being able to detect the coronavirus initially, you have to be able to kind of figure out if somebody's going to get a fever, and the way that the body and how their temperature, the body's temperature starts fluctuating and things like that. It is interesting, and I saw a lot of people on Twitter talk about this, how, the NBA is kind of the main people that's going to be able to use the ring, and you have, people who's working in the front lines who didn't even know about the ring or isn't using the ring. But along those lines, you talked about what it's valued, almost $300. So, it's interesting to see if the NBA is able to use it, and if they're able to really detect the coronavirus, and it is as accurate as the article states, then are we going to start seeing more people use it, more people in the front lines, or maybe more people who are at higher risk? Once school starts coming back, maybe you have an older professor. Are they going to be able to use the ring, or is the school going to pay for one of those rings to use for a professor who's at a higher risk, or something like that? For me, I think the main topics about the coronavirus that really affect sports is, first and foremost, the way that Florida is handling their cases. Again, you had a lot of teams down there. You had the NBA who's planning to go down there. You had Major League. You have teams down there in spring training, trying to get something back. And now they're testing positive. Again, the Phillies, for example, having 5 players, 3 staff members who were down there in Florida testing positive for the coronavirus. And of course, anything could happen over a month. I mean, if you look at New Jersey, their peak was probably around, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks, with, basically the same amount of cases that Florida had. I think New Jersey had 4,300 at its peak, and Florida, as of yesterday, if I remember correctly, so the 20th, had around 4,000 cases. So, and New Jersey was the second second most hit state in the country in terms of the coronavirus. So, and now you're looking at New Jersey, you're looking at New York, 2 states that was really hit by coronavirus, that seems like they're on the upswing in terms of reopening stuff and in terms of letting teams get back into action, where now you have the Yankees who announced that they're going to be moving their spring training from Florida up to New York because New York is handling their cases a little bit better. So it's going to be interesting to see how the NBA kind of handles that, because are you going to pull the plug on all these plans that you had if Florida's cases continue going up, where experts are saying it might go up to 6,000 cases a day? Are you going to pull the plug on the NBA and either try to relocate it somewhere else or just pull it entirely? Or are you just going to say, what stuff happens, we have our bubble, we're going to allow the players to come in? So that's one of the main stories that I think on a negative side is a little bit interesting. I think on a positive side, though, the fact that international teams are starting to find ways to play. Again, you have boxing and the UFC finding a way to be in action. You have soccer, you have tennis, you have the Chinese basketball league. And we all know that China was the first epicenter of the coronavirus before, it started getting over to the United States and other countries. So the fact that the Chinese basketball league is starting to restart and find a way to get into action, it shows that it can be done, but it's just going to be a question of when it could be done. And I want to kind of shift this question to you guys. Again, I'm going to focus a little bit more on the NBA, because I think the NBA is probably the first major sport that's trying to get back into action. Of course, the NHL had their plans. MLB is trying to work out their plans, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And the NFL has their plans. But if you're the NBA, this big sport that's trying to come back, if you look at Florida and their cases, what do you do in this situation? Do you just wait and see what happens with Florida over the next couple of weeks, or do you start finding another ways to relocate?
Well, I think you got to be careful here, because if you look at the plans, you have a lot of people. There's 3 hotels they're using. They're putting multiple teams in these hotels, and I think they got to take a look at what we were seeing in international soccer, how teams were on their own training grounds, and that was able to isolate teams, which make for training and everything, which made it kind of like if there was like kind of an outbreak or something, you can isolate those players on that team, and the entire league isn't going to really get it. Here, when you're having this plan, while it could still be in a bubble, which is great, and all it takes is one person in one hotel to get it, and then maybe everyone in that whole hotel gets contaminated, and then boom, you have a quarter of your teams that are playing in the playoffs are out at that point. So I think maybe they have to try to shift it away from them being all in one hotel together, especially with Florida being so dangerous right now with the coronavirus, because you have someone wants to deliver food or something like that. Maybe they're asymptomatic, and then a whole team, a whole roster, all even more can get it from that. So I think you just got to be careful with that. I think if they could develop a way maybe to get Disney to have each one of their properties that Disney has, maybe put a team in one of them, do it like that, maybe that would work out the best way.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, this time is definitely the time to get creative with sports. And if the positives don't really stand up to the negatives, then the NBA season shouldn't restart. I mean, if players, coaches, staff, very influential and high-powered people are getting sick, possibly could die, then there's really no initiative or point to really figure out ways to make the season work. There's always so many other seasons, and there's only so much you can do, especially in a time like this.
I mean, there's a lot of other things that you can do, and I think if you're the NBA, again, at the end of the day, the NBA is a business, and they're going to try to find a way to get their revenue, and they're going to try to find a way to at least minimize the losses that they've had over these past, 100, 101, 102 days. But in the same token, if the people that's getting you money, start turning out sick, then what's going to happen? I think if you're the NBA, of course, you probably should wait it out a little bit more and see what happens in Florida over the next, week or two. Maybe this is the peak right now in Florida, and then it starts going down, or maybe the peak continues to get higher in Florida. And if around July, the beginning of July, cases still rise in Florida and deaths still rise in Florida, then you might have to find another way to operate the basketball league. I know I saw a couple of jokes that people were saying that the NBA should just have, an outside park or something like that and have players play on the outside park, because it's shown that the coronavirus doesn't really spread as much outside as it does indoors. Like having it at Dykeman Park or something like that, where you can still have a couple of fans around there and be able to play basketball. Or maybe if you want to get really creative, turn a football field into like a little basketball court or something like that. Because again, being outside is a little bit better than being inside. So if you were to have a player test positive and they're asymptomatic and they had it, but you're outside, then you have the fresh air and stuff like that, where it could be less likely that somebody would get it then, versus if you're inside and you have ventilation, air conditioning, et cetera, where the coronavirus could be, and then you have more players test positive, or you have more players breathing in that air, then they could test positive and possibly get it. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens down there, because again, if the NBA can't just tell Florida what to do, because that's not the way government works. It's going to be interesting to see how Florida takes these cases and tries to find a way to minimize the amount of people that's getting infected and still have a way for the NBA to continue action. So to move on from the NBA, like I said, we're going to talk about in a little bit the MLB. And the MLB is having a lot of issues, but these issues are outside of coronavirus. I mean, you have, of course, I mean, it is within the coronavirus, because you had the major league having to stop because of the coronavirus. But it seems like right now, in terms of actually restarting, you have a lot of issues. You have the Players Association and the owners going back and forth in terms of money that the players are going to get in their salaries, how many games are going to get played, a lot of things like that. And you even have Rob Manfred. He's been going back and forth on his word, first saying that the season, will happen, and then a couple of days later saying that it's unlikely to happen. And now you have the latest offer for the MLB, the Players Association, waiting a couple of days to vote on if they agree with the proposal or not. So I guess to go on this from both sides, if you're the owners, what do you do in this situation? Because again, this is a money thing. The MLB is a business too. If you're the owners, what do you do in this situation with these back and forths? And if you're a player who wants to play, because there has been players that basically said, just tell us when to play, just tell us where to go, when to play, and we'll play. What do you do in this situation?
Well, I think there's a little bit more to that's going on behind the scenes than just where and when to play, because I think what the owners are thinking is there's probably going to be a labor strike next year, because I believe the bargaining agreement's up between the players and owners, and I think they kind of want to, and that might be a strike then too. So I feel like for the owners, you got to think, we want to play now because there legitimately might not be another season. But at the same time, they're thinking there's not really any revenue right now that they're going to get, so is it even worth it? I mean, if you look at the rosters, they're paying all the players. They want to lessen how much they want to pay, but how much they want to pay the players. But then the players are saying, no, we're playing. Like if you saw Blake Snell, he said, I'm not going to pay, or you're going to have to pay me my full wages, my full salary for the year, because I'm risking my life to entertain people. And they're not wrong. The players kind of hold all the cards here, because the owners can say, here, here's what our schedule is. But the players can straight up say, no, it's not worth it, or you're going to pay us a certain amount, or we're not going to play. So I think that's interesting to see what happens. I think that's what the owners are struggling with the most here.
Yeah, I agree. The players definitely have more powers in the front office. I mean, without the players, there would be no league. But the MLB is doing everything they can. With each game without fans, they lose $640,000 a game. And you know, they're getting creative. They might enforce ties in the postseason. They might, do stuff differently. They might tell players to act this way, act that way. But in the end of the day, the players really determine how this is going to go, and we just have to wait and see.
Yeah, you look at currently what's going on with the MLB. Right now, the Players Association said on Friday that the league will not counter its proposal for a 70-game season, leaving the players with either two options: accepting the 60-game offer with expanded playoffs, or just reject it and have Rob Manfred implement his own schedule. So, from what I'm seeing right now, they plan on voting today at the time of recording, so Father's Day, June 21st. So there is a possibility that when you're listening to this, that the MLB might have some sort of action or some sort of proposal in play to start the MLB season. But again, the MLB is kind of, their backs against the wall with this whole coronavirus thing, and just, with the Players Association, because again, you're not getting your revenue, you're not getting your money. And the owners are trying to find a way to be able to still have players play, but still trying to keep their money. So the first huge reason that these negotiations weren't working out is because you had players arguing about their salaries. You had the owners, I think it was around 60% of their salaries or something like that. I forgot, or I'm blanking on what specifically the numbers are, but you had the owners propose, take a little bit of a pay cut, but the players, still need this money. Of course, you have like the high end players, but you also have the lower tier players, and you also had minor league ballparks. Their players, the minor league players, not getting their salaries at all for a couple of teams. I think the Mets were one of those teams that did not pay their minor league players, but you also had other teams that paid their minor league players. So you have that issue. You have an issue of coronavirus testing and the long-term effects of coronavirus, which was I think the second main thing that the players were kind of worried about. Is there's been, studies, and there's been things that show that, maybe you have the coronavirus and you're asymptomatic, or, you have mild symptoms, but it still scars like your lungs or something like that. And of course, if you're a professional athlete or MLB player, you kind of need to breathe, to say the least. But what happens there if, somebody does test positive, but they have mild symptoms and they're able to recover, but now they're not performing, to the best of their abilities because the coronavirus affected them in that way. So you have all of these questions coming in with the restart of the season. And again, you also have now the training camps being temporarily closed. So with this proposal, they're trying to figure out how can they get players out there safely, how can they minimize the amount of contact, I would say, for lack of better terms, between these players, but how do you still get the players in their benefit, and how do you get their money? So if you are an MLB player, which way do you vote? Because again, they're kind of left here with two options. Either you accept the 60-game, offer with playoffs, or you just say, you know what, Manfred, just tell us what to do. Which side of the coin do you go here if you're an MLB player?
I feel like if I'm an MLB player, I kind of want to put my foot down. I mean, the owners have so much power in the league, and especially now. I mean, MLB players are going to want to stick up for their minor league brothers as well, because the minor leaguers get the short end of the stick all the time. And I think at this point, a lot of players are fed up about it. And I think that you do have your stars who are kind of like, let's just play, who cares? But there's a lot of younger players who are still haven't gone through aberrations. And I think that you're not just going to be able to say, here, let's just do this. I don't think Manfred's competent enough to get that done either. I think he's honestly the worst thing that's ever happened to the sport of baseball. He's ruining the sport of baseball. I can't wait for him to be fired or just resign, because I mean that inning, that tie rule, get that out of here. That's one of the worst rules I've ever heard. There's no ties in baseball. Play extra innings. That's what's fun about the game. You don't have to put ties in there. You're ruining the game of baseball. So sorry about that rant, but I just can't stand that man. But I think the players are gonna gonna have to put their foot down.
Yeah, I agree. The players make the league. The league still gets revenue on broadcasting and advertisements and everything else that they do to sponsor, but the players ultimately have the final say. I mean, sure, like the office may say this is what we gotta do, but the players can absolutely reject it. It's America, like freedom of speech, freedom to choose. In the end of the day, it's all for the players, and I really hope the MLB really gets their situation under control, because the fans and everyone across the country wants to see this happen up again.
Yeah, and it's just interesting for me because you have two leagues that had to stop midway in their season, in the NHL and the NBA. You have those two leagues that literally had to figure out, okay, do we restart our season, and how do we figure out how do we restart our season, and then what happens, down the line with next season and stuff like that. And you had those two leagues being able to figure out something. The NHL don't have a date when they're going to return yet, but they at least have a plan on what the NHL is going to look like when they do return. The NBA, again, it's a huge question with Florida right now, but they have a plan to restart how to restart the season in terms of the regular season, in terms of practicing, in terms of how the playoffs are going to look. Again, these are two leagues that had to stop midway between their season. And of course, anything could happen in those little gaps of the regular season, and having players or having teams, get their push into playoff contention and stuff like that, which is why the NHL expanded their playoffs, why the NBA expanded basically their playoffs and having a play-in game. But you have the MLB, who hasn't had a first pitch of this season yet. So you would think it would be a little bit easier to say, okay, this is how we're going to start our season, not how we're going to restart our season and go from there. This is how we're going to start our season this year. You would think it would be a little bit more easier to say this is how we start our season versus, okay, this is how we restart our season. This is how we, make it beneficial for teams that was trying to make a push into the playoffs. This is how we continue to act moving forward. You would think that's harder, but it wasn't, because you had the NHL, you had the NBA figure out their ways, and now you just have the MLB struggling to figure out how they want to start their season. And again, you have the commissioner just going back on his word. Joe, since you did, start touching upon the league ending in a tie, that's one of the rules that the players are going to have to figure out. And there's been rules to figure out how the season is going to start in 2020. There has been proposals where every inning and every extra inning is going to have a runner on second. You're going to have possible ties and substitution rules. So I mean, Joe, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I want to let you go on your rant, because you held back. I felt you held back a little bit. I want you to go on your rant. And with these new rules that the MLB might be putting into play, do you think it should happen, or what's basically your opinion on these new rules getting proposed?
My opinion on it is that it's ruining the game of baseball. The game of baseball has been basically, other than you had the steroid era and the juice ball era, but the game of baseball has been basically constant throughout time. It's been, you play the game, you have 9 innings, you have pitcher pitches the ball, you hit the ball, you go until you find a winner. You don't just put someone on second base and say, we want to end the game earlier. No, that's not how you play. That's not baseball. You're ruining the game, because here's the issue. By doing those rules, you're not bringing in any new fans. No new fans are going to come like, oh, because in extra innings, there's a runner on second, I'm going to watch the game now. No, you're just going to put your old fans, your core fan base is going to leave. And that's going to ruin the game of baseball. And then with the juice ball thing last year, how there were so many home runs. Home runs, this is probably one of the hottest takes I have. Home runs are fun, but I'd rather see a runner on second and third with 2 outs than I would see just a home run, because there's more intensity. You see a home run, okay, now your guy walks around the bases. I want to see the intensity of a pitcher having to face down a hitter, 3-2 count, runners on second and third in the fourth inning. It's intense, and it makes the game more fun. Saying we want more home runs isn't necessarily more fun. It's like, yeah, cool, you're hitting home runs, but that's not really going to grab my attention throughout the whole game.
Yeah, I agree. Like, the fans want to see competitiveness. They want to see a close game. They want to see players really giving it their best. And, with home runs, more and more, when they start to add up, the game's pretty much over, and some teams aren't able to come back. And along with ties as well, it removes the competitiveness. Players and teams want to say they are the champions. They fought the hardest. They worked the hardest. And with a tie, it removes that specialty. Sharing the championship it's not theirs. So I feel like the MLB and everyone on the front lines of the MLB really should take the right steps and take initiative into really making the sport involved and watchable again, hopefully soon.
I think the main question for me with these new rules, it's going to be, how long do they keep these rules? Because if they were to keep it in play for, I guess, just 2020 or just for the 2020 season, just to have a way for people to not be exposed to, I guess, the coronavirus and exposed to other players, longer. I think that's one thing. If you just have it for the 2020 season where you have a runner on second, you have a possible game ending the tie maybe after, I don't know, like 12 innings or something like that, for the 2020 season, just so you could minimize interactions between players within each other and stuff like that, then okay. Like, I think at that point we're in such an unprecedented time where, you might need to do a little changes. You might need to do stuff where interactions between players are a little bit, are minimal. And if you have a game that, goes like 12 innings, 14 innings, 18 innings, stuff like that, where we've seen, games be that long, then you're just only increasing the possibility of somebody getting coronavirus and having another outbreak. But if, again, you implement these rules just to kind of make the game a little bit shorter, just to minimize minimize the players' interaction with other players or even coaches and stuff like that, then okay, that's one thing. But if you're going to implement these rules to try to bring in more fans, then that's not going to work out, because I would say, even for me too, like, you kind of enjoy seeing those games go those extra innings. When Boston went into the World Series, I want to say, I believe it was 2018, if I remember correctly, either 2018 or 2019, when they went to the World Series and one of their games went extra innings. That's more exciting, because it's like, okay, one mess up, one play could really make the difference here. When there was a Mets game that I went to that went, I think, 13 or 14 innings. Like, being able to watch those extra innings makes the game a little bit more exciting, because, like you said, Joe, it's like it brings that extra excitement. It brings that extra tension between, okay, what play is going to be that play to make a difference. So if if this is a rule for the long run, then I don't think that'll help out anything, because the MLB, their demographic is, those older diehard fans, and those older diehard fans, they want to be able to watch those extra innings, and they want to be able to, still have that old school feeling watching baseball. But again, it's that one. It's the times that we're in right now. If you want to make those changes just to, alleviate stuff, just to, try to find a way, okay, go for it. But I don't think that this should be a rule that should be implemented in the long run.
The scary part to me, though, is that Manfred's been talking about this stuff for a while now. He's been saying we got to speed up the pace of play. We got to speed up play. So if you put it in this year, which I guess I can understand a little bit, he's going to try to make it so that stays, and that's what kind of scares me. And I feel like personally, you're already going to be out there for 3 hours. What's an extra 2 hours really going to change too much with the coronavirus out there? You're already interacting with people in the dugout. You're already interacting with people there. I don't really understand how. I mean, I'm not a doctor. I'm going to put that out there right now. I don't know everything about it, but I feel like an extra hour of play isn't going to make too much of a difference for a tie. But if scientists come out, doctors come out and say it's safer that way, then you're definitely got to end in a tie, because we can't have more people getting sick.
Yeah, definitely it's a time for the MLB to do some trial and error with these new rules. This time is very unprecedented and everything's pretty much up in the air, but they could see if they can implement it. If it works, great. If not, oh well. There's still time to figure everything out. Definitely the risk is low. For sure. And it's outdoors. There's definitely a ton of space, a ton of height, has all the dimensions going. So unless the scientists completely are against it, then I say, they should just drop it and move on and, train for next year.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that probably should happen too. But again, the MLB is a business, and they have to find a way to start off the season this year. I mean, that was kind of my take that I had with the NBA. I think that the NBA should just kind of drop the season and call it a day. But again, they have to find a way to make their money at the end of the day. I mean, Joe, I agree with you too that these plans where these rules were in circulation for about a year or two now, and there's been getting a lot of backlash since then. So Rob Manfred might use the excuse of, hey, we're trying to use this for the coronavirus, and then just keep it in play just because. But again, like I said, I don't think that these are rules that should be implemented for the long run. I think if it's just today, or not just today, just this season, then you should be able to do it, because again, I think the amount of time of interactions between players makes a difference with the coronavirus. So, I think maybe that's why, the extra 2 hours might make a little bit of a difference, especially if it's outdoors. But again, I'm not a doctor reader. I don't know. I just read the articles that, everybody is reading or everybody has access to. So to move from, I guess, one outdoor sport to another outdoor sport, the NFL, they're still slowly trying to figure out their off season, but it seems like the biggest story for the New York area in the off season has been Jamal Adams. And Jamal Adams is a stud safety for the Jets. They've been going back and forth between contract negotiations. Jamal Adams thinks that he deserves top dollar, and rightfully so. His stats do show that he deserves a decent amount of money, but the Jets are, being a little bit hesitant with giving him a contract because of the coronavirus and how much money the NFL is really going to be able to make, salary cap, a lot of those issues. So it came out recently that after that stalemate between Jamal Adams and the Jets getting this new contract, that Jamal Adams requested a trade from the Jets. Now, requesting a trade does not mean anything. It does not mean that he's going to go to a new team. But it does show that he is getting frustrated with the team. It shows that, he wants to move on. And according to Adam Schefter, a couple of teams that Jamal Adams will be open to go to is the Baltimore Ravens, the Dallas Cowboys, Houston Texans, Kansas City Chiefs, the Eagles, the 49ers, the Seahawks, and the Buccaneers. So as we did with the MLB, we're going to look at this from two sides. So if you're the New York Jets and their owners, what do you do with this situation with Jamal Adams? Because, again, he could, be a threat in the locker room where, he continues to express his frustration with this team. But it is possible that you still keep him because he's on contract for 2 more years with the Jets. So if you're the ownership for Gang Green, what do you do in this situation? And, how do you maneuver this Jamal Adams situation? And if you're Jamal Adams, what do you do? Because we've seen that sometimes being that frustrated player and being that issue in the locker room could help you out in the long run in terms of getting released if you are actually frustrated with the team. So, both sides. What do you do if you're the Jets? What do you do if you're Jamal Adams?
Well, if I'm the Jets, I'd like to see, first off, could this be a ploy from Jamal Adams just to try to get a better deal contract-wise? Maybe he's not truly frustrated with the Jets in the locker room. Maybe just trying to say, I want to stay here, but if I play my cards right, I can get more money out of it. But if I'm the Jets also, I kind of looking to trade him because you don't want to just let him walk. If he's just going to walk in free agency, you're getting a compensatory pick, which is probably going to be maybe a second-rounder max, maybe third. So I think you try to trade him to one of those teams. Whoever gives you the best offer, you trade him to that, and you could kind of go from there. Maybe get a good draft pick. Like I think the Cardinals would be a great landing spot for Jamal. I think it's a young team. They have a lot of cap space right now, and he could be a player that could push them into being championship contenders on the defensive side. They already have Pat Pete over there, shut down corner, although he is getting older. Put in a great box safety over there. Who knows what could happen? I mean, I think that's probably, if I'm Jamal Adams, that's where I want to land the most. If I'm the Cardinals, I think he's named us. It's time we could really make a play here. Kyler Murray looked very good last year. He surprised me. I wasn't one of the biggest believers of Kyler Murray, but he really showed me up. So I think that's what you got to do if you're the Jets. You got to maybe behind the scenes, like I said earlier, he's still trying to get a contract, but if not, you go full trade him. I mean, look what happened with the Steelers with Antonio Brown when basically something similar happened to this. Antonio Brown's now out of the league now. It doesn't seem like Jamal Adams has these character problems that Antonio Brown exhibited towards the end of his NFL career at this moment. But they can get a pick or something. Maybe that turns into a player like Devin Bush, who could be a defensive anchor for them. Who knows? But I think the Jets really are still in a very good position here.
Yeah. There is definitely a lot of behind-the-scenes action going on. I mean, if I were the Jets, you can't really control what the players do. But if he is ultimately unhappy in the end of the day, I'd say he should get traded. Probably be for like another player, his talent, or a couple of round picks. And, if I was Jamal Adams, I'd say look for every opportunity possible. And if it doesn't work out, he also has to understand this is very unprecedented time. And the Jets are doing everything they can to help their players with what's going on with them financially. So, we just have to wait and see. But Jamal Adams, he is a defensive first player. He's helped the Jets so much in the regular season. And it's definitely exciting to see where he'll end up and how the impact and the team he plays for will happen.
I think if you're the Jets, you don't want to lose another key player because they recently just lost Robbie Anderson. And now, Jamal Adams is the lifeline of the defense. Robbie Anderson was pretty much the lifeline of the offense with, Sam Darnold being a little inconsistent with his injuries last year, with Le'Veon Bell being inconsistent as well. You had Robbie Anderson on the offense, and he was a top wide receiver, and the Jets had to let him go. You don't want to let Jamal Adams go too, because the Jets their defense was a team that got hit with a lot of injuries, and they were still a pretty decent team with their injuries, but they were looking to possibly continue to grow next season. And Jamal Adams will be that player to help them grow next season. And if you're the Jets and you can find a way to keep him, you want to keep him. He's a young safety. He's a really good safety. Again, the stats show, how good Jamal Adams is in that safety position. But along the same lines, if you could find a way to trade him, because right now the market is, hot for him. He's coming off of a great season with the Jets, 75 tackles, 8.5 sacks, and interceptions. So, he's coming off of a great season. And even the season before that, 115 tackles at the safety position. So it's coming off 2 great seasons. And you could probably find a really solid team that would be able to give something back. But again, he is, the Jets on defense. But along the same lines, if he's not happy, you don't want that cancer on your team. Like you said, Joe, it happened with Antonio Brown. He was showing a lot of issues. The Steelers got rid of him, and they were a pretty good team. Again, some injuries that happened to the Steelers on the offensive side that they weren't able to control, but there were still a couple of games from going to the playoffs. In a team sport like football, you don't need that. You don't need that person. You don't need that character in your locker room. So if you were to trade him, then you have to trade him. I think, according to Vegas, the Ravens have the best chance of picking up Jamal Adams in a trade, and I think he probably would fit the Ravens. The Ravens are a team that, if you look at their defense and their defensive secondary, they're one of the top secondaries in the league. And to insert Jamal Adams with Earl Thomas and then the corners that the Ravens have, and the front seven that the Ravens are starting to, rekindle, then I think that it would be a pretty solid fit for Jamal Adams because of the way that he plays that safety position. But, do you want to trade him to a team that already seems like they're going to be a Super Bowl favorite? Is the Ravens going to give something back? Because if the Ravens give, like a first rounder or a second rounder for him, it's not going to be as good if you get, a first or a second rounder from somebody like the Cowboys or maybe the Cardinals or the Eagles, because their expectations aren't really that great for this season, and you expect them to have a better draft pick, whereas the Ravens, again, they're projected to be one of the better teams in the AFC, and you're not really going to get a good draft pick. You might get a couple of players, but who are the Ravens really going to trade? The only player I can see them possibly trading is Tavon Young. You're not going to trade Earl Thomas. You're not going to trade Jimmy Smith. You're not going to trade Marlon Humphrey if you're the Ravens. So who are you really going to trade? Whereas, a couple of these other teams, they might have more assets to give to the Jets. So, again, if you're the Jets in this situation, you kind of you have the upper hand here. You don't kind of have the upper hand, but you have the upper hand because you could be able to try to get a good trade from somebody. But in this situation, if you're Jamal Adams and you're genuinely unhappy with the team, then you have to have them force their hand a little bit more. Just saying that you want to demand a trade isn't really going to do much, because again, just demanding a trade really doesn't help anything. You're going to have to try to force their hand one way or another. Again, this is if you're genuinely unhappy. You're going to have to force their hand one way or another. You're going to have to, be a little bit more of a disturbance. You're going to have to try to get your agent in this a little bit more. And you're going to have to find a way. So, Joe, you kind of answered the question. So, George, to go to you, back to both of you guys, because I know, Joe, you said that the Cardinals are probably a good fit, but realistically, where do we see Jamal Adams playing next year?
I could see definitely the Ravens. I mean, I hope not. I mean, that would make my life awful. But I could see the Ravens. I think an issue with them would be the cap, but the Ravens have a great front office, so I mean they can make that work. It doesn't really matter for them. When you have good front offices, the cap really doesn't matter too much. You know how to finesse the cap and how to get your player signed. The question is, would the Jets want to trade into their division? I could see them, not division, conference. I don't know if they want to do that, especially because I personally have a lot of faith in Sam Darnold. I'm pretty sure the Jets have a lot of faith in Sam Darnold. They're rebuilding their offensive line now. Do you want to trade him inside the conference to be a playoff contender, to a playoff contender, or Super Bowl contender that can hamper their own ability to make the playoffs? You know, so I think it's going to go to an NFC team, and I really think the Cardinals are going to go out there. I mean, they've shown that they went out and traded for DeAndre Hopkins, so they've shown they're ambitious. They want to work with this team. They think they have a quarterback that's a stud, which he's looking like it, like I said earlier, in Kyler Murray. I'm pretty sure they want to get a ring for Larry Fitzgerald, who's a legend, first ballot Hall of Famer, no doubt in my mind. So I think they're going to make the biggest push for him.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for a game like football, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And if Jamal Adams is causing disruptions, really letting his frustrations out in the locker room, then the front office has to take initiative and find another spot for him. The Cardinals definitely is a great team. I also feel the Texans would be great as well. You know, they're really up and coming. They're really trying to rebuild. They did pretty well in the season, and they did remarkable in the playoffs in their playoff run last year. And I feel like Jamal Adams could be a real asset for the team because the Houston Texans, they have the offensive side. They have a good QB. They have good wide receivers. But the defensive side could always use some work. You know, defense always wins games, and Jamal Adams could be that guy for them and really give that infectious energy he has to the defense.
You know, for me, it's going to be a question of, are the Jets petty or not, to say the least. I think realistically, if you look at it, I think the three teams that you could probably see Jamal Adams at next season is either back with the Jets, with the Ravens, or with the Cowboys. The Cowboys, you know, down in Texas, is Jamal Adams' like hometown essentially. And I know the Cowboys actually tried to pursue him a little bit before this offseason. So there could be a question of, are the Cowboys going to push him a little bit more, or pursue him, a little bit more. The Ravens, like you said, Joe, their front office is pretty good, but it's going to be a question of, do they want to do another trade? Because they recently just got Calais Campbell. They got Marcus Peters and had to sign him to a contract too. So Jamal Adams is asking for pretty good money. And you have to worry about Lamar Jackson in a couple of years and the money that you're going to pay him. And if he's able to have another great season, how much are you going to pay Lamar Jackson? So I think realistically, you might see him on one of those three teams. I think even though Vegas gives Ravens the best odds, I think out of those three, I think the Ravens are probably third. I think Cowboys will be second, Jets will be first. I think the Jets will probably find a way not to trade him this season. Again, the Cowboys, they have they have more room than the Ravens in terms of trying to get Jamal Adams, and I also think that he'll probably be a better fit in the Cowboys. And in the Ravens, I mean, again, you've seen that the Ravens are masters with the front office. And they could probably find a way to get Jamal Adams, but I also think in the same token that the Ravens don't really need him, and they don't really need that hit to their cap space if they do pick him up. So I think those are probably the three realistic teams, but again, it's going to be a question of, do the Jets want to trade him to the Cowboys, or do the Jets want to trade him to the Ravens? And I think if the Jets try to play a little bit more of a petty side and try not to give Jamal Adams, his best situation, then I think probably either the Cardinals, the Eagles, honestly, or even the Texans would probably be the other three if the Jets are trying to deviate a little bit from Jamal Adams' personal needs. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens with Jamal Adams over these next couple of weeks and months probably. But as we're starting to wind down a little bit, one topic to talk about to go back into the NBA, because it does still have to do a little bit locally. Kyrie Irving kind of fueled a discussion on whether to restart the season or not. And again, with us kind of winding down a little bit of time, I don't want to get into a deep discussion in terms of, what Kyrie specifically said and the backlash that's coming from the team. But I just want to know, do you agree with Kyrie Irving? Because to say my opinion, he kind of has a point in terms of restarting the season and in terms of how the public is going to view the NBA and societal issues if the NBA does start. Because you look at sports over the past couple of years, and in terms of when players were trying to use their voice to talk about societal issues, it doesn't really, trying to figure out the best words for this, but it makes the headlines for about a couple of days, maybe a week, and then it just disappears. You had the NBA players wearing the "I Can't Breathe" shirt a couple of years ago, and that was them using their platform for that. You had the Clippers in the whole Sterling issue, and you had the NBA players using their on the court platform for that. But now you have maybe not a bigger issue, but the same issue on a more international and a bigger scale than what it was, years prior. Do you go back to the same way that you had before, where you continue to play basketball, or you restart the season if the season does restart, and try to use your on-court voice? Or do you say, let's not start the season, let's try something else here? Because if we do start the season, then people are going to try to, wash away the news and wash away what's going on with NBA basketball. So I think Kyrie does have a point there. But ultimately, I think you have to be united if that's something that you do want to do. And it seems like right now that the league is not united in terms of what Kyrie is saying. So if you have a division in trying to relay a message, then it doesn't really impact the message as much. But if you have everybody, on the same side, then go with that. But I think that's probably the ultimate decision is, if are the players going to get into the same side of, let's not restart the season because we want to have the world focus on, what's really been going on, or let's restart the season and use our court voice to show the world what's really going on. Either decision, I think, could work, but you have to have that united voice in order for it to work.
I think Kyrie's getting a lot of hate, and he's a NBA players rep. So this might not just be his own feelings. This might be a lot of people's feelings. And I don't think Kyrie's getting fair judgment and fair criticism from the media. I think a lot of people are like, oh, Kyrie, Earth's flat guy. He's just a guy who has crazy opinions. This is a guy who's a smart guy. He cares a lot, and he cares for his fellow players. And I think a lot of people are kind of being very, very not fair to him. And there's kind of like, oh, look at this guy. He's too extreme. But I think there's probably a lot of players who feel this way. I kind of feel this way too, because I know how a lot of people react. Once sports comes on, the real world doesn't really exist anymore. So I think that Kyrie has a very fair point. I will say the NBA does a great job of letting players express themselves, unlike the NFL. They go out of their way to try to help people and let players use their personal opinions and use their voice, and more than any other league in the world. So kudos to the NBA for that. But I just feel like everyone just likes to pile on Kyrie. He's the scapegoat. He's the guy when everything when there's different opinions or something like that. They'll be like, oh, look at this guy Kyrie. He's just out there. But I think he really does have valid points, and I think it's time we start giving him some credit and props for sticking up for his fellow teammates and fellow players in the league.
Yeah, I mean, like, athletes want to use their platforms to hopefully make a change and express what they're feeling and hope others can either learn from it or make a discussion to see what can be done. Like Drew Brees, for example, he said his feelings and other people like jumped on him and ostracized him for that. And I really hope the same doesn't happen to Kyrie. Kyrie, he's all for the Black Lives Matter movement. He wants equality. He wants his teammates to have their voices heard. So if I was part of the front office, I would try to let Kyrie expand on his ideas of what can be done, and hopefully the league will follow.
And I think, again, that's going to be a discussion that we have to see what happens, down the line. Again, I think, like you said, Joe, the media has been using Kyrie as a scapegoat because Kyrie has been saying opinions that go against the norm. And I think, sometimes you need those opinions that go against the norm, especially in the situation that we're in right now. But again, it's going to be interesting to see how that story develops, if it does develop past what we've seen so far. A couple of minutes left, so I just want to get into some last licks. So one sports topic or one game story from international leagues or something like that. Just one sports thing that you want to bring up that we did not talk about in this show. We're going to start with you, Joe.
So some of you may know, some of you may not, but I'm a big Premier League fan, big fan of Tottenham Hotspur in North London. So with the Prem coming back, there's a lot going on right now. Liverpool is a chance to win the league in the next few days. But the top four fight is going still strong. Chelsea got the win today, which really helped them out trying to secure the top four, which means they'll be playing in the Champions League, which is arguably the best competition in world soccer. And I mean, there's a lot of teams that lost, like in Drew. I mean, Arsenal yesterday, they lost one of the best keepers in the world, probably the second best keeper in the Premier League yesterday on a crazy injury. So we'll see what happens with them. They're basically out of the top four race now. And with a lot of teams drawing, I mean, there's still a lot going on. So it's going to be an intense action the rest of the way.
Yeah, Arsenal with their terrible injury yesterday, Bernd Leno, starting goalkeeper. He was stretchered off the game yesterday when he jumped in the air to catch a ball, and then he fell the wrong way awkwardly to hyperextend his knee. And for Arsenal, he's a key player. I mean, even though the team lost 1-2 against Brighton at home yesterday, he had a 71% pass rating. He has 218 saves. He saved a penalty kick this season. He was better than his last guy, who eventually, got a little bit older, lost some of his drive. So I feel like for Arsenal, it's going to be really tough for them to play these next few games when they have Emilio Martinez, who this is his 6th appearance in the Premier League, who doesn't have the stats. So if I was Arsenal, I would really try to focus on defensive first to help Martinez out, because their next game is with Southampton, who's 13th in the league, while Arsenal's 9th. But we just really have to see where it goes with Arsenal. I mean, Liverpool is really killing it right now. And hopefully Arsenal, and the team really come back, and Bernd Leno is healthy as well and can play again soon.
Yeah, make sure you check out our articles at WSOU.net or our social media at WSOU Sports to see a couple of these Premier League articles. Joe recently wrote one, I think yesterday or a day before, about a match, so definitely go check that out. For me, my last league is a little bit local in high school sports. The NJSIAA released their guidelines for how sports could return in the state. And again, New Jersey has been one of the better states in terms of containing the coronavirus. So, It's always going to be a huge question of how is kids going to go to school first before we figure out how kids are going to be able to play sports. But the fact that these guidelines have been released and that New Jersey so far has been doing well with the coronavirus, we should hopefully see some high school sports come soon in the state. But that will do it here for this latest edition of WSOU Sports Talk. For Joe Cammarota and Joe Cammarota and George Makris. I just realized, why are you guys' names so close? Like, I didn't realize this like while we are doing the show, but you guys' names are like Joe and George is really close, but it's not that close in terms of spelling, but it's that close when you talk about it. That's besides the point, though. For them two, I'm Wilnir Louis. Make sure, again, you check out our social media at WSOU Sports on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and WSOU.net website for the latest sports articles that we have been writing. Check those out. Enjoy the rest of your day. And again, happy Father's Day, because we are recording this on Father's Day.